everyone, and a huge thank you for joining us today for a discussion on how to get promoted beyond staff engineer. The webinar will last roughly 45 minutes, after which both myself and the panelists will head over to the Lead Dev Slack to answer some of your questions in the Staff Plus channel. We may also have time to answer a couple of questions live, so please do submit those to the Q&A feature on Zoom, and we'll get to them if we can towards the end. So let's get started with some introductions. My name is Blanca, and today I'll be joined by Andrew, Joy, Scott, and Janine. I'll ask each of you to introduce yourselves. Could you please answer in roughly 60 seconds who you are and tell us how you became a principal engineer? I'm going to start in alphabetical order by name. So Andrew, would you go first?
Hi, yeah, thanks. I'm Andrew Ecott. I'm a staff engineer or staff plus engineer for the last 7 years in 3 different companies. I spent the last 2 years at Miro working on authentication and content management, and before that, 3 years at Skyscanner on their machine learning platform. So the how I first got the principal engineer title kind of is a long story, but it grew around me is the short answer. I was in a company that I could see gaps between architecture and engineering teams and just started filling those gaps organically, and over time the title kind of came my way and I started learning more about what that meant in the industry and kind of went from there really. So it's it's a complicated story, but
Thank you for sharing that. Joy, would you go next?
Yeah. So I'm a principal engineer at Split Software. We do feature flagging stuff. Prior to Split, I was at Box for a number of years, and prior to that, I worked at a tiny startup at Microsoft for short periods. But my journey, I guess I went into management at some point from about a senior SWE. I hated it, moved back to a staff position. From there, I went through kind of a standard promotion process to get to senior staff. This was at Box. And then I moved to Split, where we don't actually have titles. At some point I asked, what title can I use publicly? And originally it was senior staff. And at some point they're like, oh, actually you can use principal. So I don't know, it feels like a fake promotion. I'm not sure if it is, but yeah, that's kind of my journey here.
Wow, that's quite a story. Thank you. Now we'll move on to Scott.
Yeah, I like Joy's story. It reminds me of mine in certain ways. So I worked at Yelp previously for almost a decade, and for a long time we didn't have formal levels at all. And then as they came along, I was placed into a sort of staff equivalent role there. So I don't know if you call that a promotion or not, but it was whatever it was. And I came over to Stripe as kind of a similar staffish level and was there for a few years before a promotion. And I think kind of like Joy, in both of those companies' cases, the levels were just numbers ordered in rank. And you do your best to infer what they are broadly. Definitely tricky to tell across companies here.
Wow. Thank you. And last but not least, Shani.
Hello, Shanid Ghafoor. I've been in the industry in and around for 20 plus years at this point of time, various roles across different places. I think for the recent past, I've been with Comcast. That's where I am right now. I'm a distinguished engineer with their consumer experiences team. I'm based out of Philadelphia, as I mentioned earlier. And I think the way I came into my roles is effectively through a lot of conversations, a lot of bridging the gap. I really sort of agree with what Andrew was saying, finding the gaps, filling yourself into those gaps, making yourself useful, and then you sort of see everything come to you, right? So I think that's been my observation as well. So, really excited to be here and to talk with everyone.
Amazing. Thank you, everyone. So back to our webinar theme for today. Are you wondering what it takes to continue progressing on the Staff Plus path? You might be in a staff engineer role, thinking about what you need to prepare to unlock your next promotion. Or you're a manager and you're looking to understand more about the role so you can better support your direct reports or establish partnerships with senior staff people. Last month, we uncovered the skills that will help senior engineers make the first leap into a technical leadership ladder. Today, we'll be discussing what is required for the next levels. Let's hear from our expert panel. And we're going to start with a first topic, which is around what is the different skill set that you need for this level. We're going to start with Janine. What is the key point about the skill set that you'd like to highlight?
Yeah, I think often when I get asked this question by folks that I'm mentoring or otherwise, I think my usual answer is, the skills that sort of got you to this level aren't the ones that are going to take you any further. And there's a very specific reason for that. What you will notice is that as you basically progress across, on your career ladder, there'll be a lot less clarity and a lot more fuzziness in terms of everything. When I mean fuzziness, it means like, what is it that you're supposed to do on a day-to-day basis? How much direction are people giving you on a project that you're responsible for? And even extends to what exactly your role is. The biggest skill that you bring to the table for your organization and for your team is your ability to effectively take that fuzziness away and bring clarity to it. You're expected to effectively help not just yourself, but the folks around you see that vision, see what they're supposed to be doing, and sort of help unite people. That skill to simplify and bring clarity and take everyone on the journey with you, that's the primary skill from my perspective.
Thank you. I can definitely relate to that. And also I found that people look at you for that clarity. So you better enjoy doing that. We're going to move on to Scott next. Can you give us an example of what delegating work looks like at this level?
Yeah. I mean, I love Shanad's framing of it as improving clarity, right? You don't take it necessarily to zero, and other people might still be doing it for you. But I think to me that is delegation, is finding a way to give the people who are more focused in their scope than you are a simpler version of the problem to work on. And I think like at staff, we're all used to doing this. Like it's been probably a while since you personally did every bit of work that you were providing leverage over. For me, I think the big difference at Principal is instead of kind of receiving well-formed problems and producing specs or designs or concrete outcomes, I tend to work a level up now, right? It's receiving big, vague directions and producing a problem statement or a few problem statements, and then delegating those to yet more people who are going to do my old job of taking the problem statements and turning them into designs. And so that can mean developing TLs under me. It can mean developing groups of TLs under me sometimes, depending on how much work is to be done. And for me, it involves getting really good at basically working on judging and fostering the conditions for great design, even where I'm no longer a deep expert in those areas, which is a pretty meaningful shift from what it used to be. Involves a whole new set of skills. And if you're looking to practice that for the first time, I might suggest running a design review process, like owning the process itself, because it gives you a lot of on-the-ground experience with seeing other people's designs, trying to give useful feedback, even though you're not going to be the ultimate expert in any single one of them.
Thank you. One quick question. When you said developing TLs, you mean tech leads?
Yes, tech leads. Yes,
Yeah,
thank
okay.
you. Or staff engineers, essentially.
Or staff so you're kind of delegating to people who will then also delegate onwards.
Yeah. Much like I used to get projects coming into me before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, cool. Thank you. We're going to quickly go back to Shanine and ask, how can building bridges help you advance with your goals within the organization?
Yeah, I think that's another important skill to build. It's a great question for that reason, right? It's another very important skill to build, because your ability to effectively build those relationships with your peer networks, your managers, your supporters, that's going to be a crucial factor in your success, right? You have to be able to build deep enough relationships within your network so that you have folks that you can turn to when you need help. But it also goes to the level that the people on that network know you, they understand you, they have enough trust in the relationship that they are willing to listen to your vision. So I talked earlier about clarity and vision and all that. Your vision's only as useful as the people who are willing to listen to it. If you're not even going to be able to have a good conversation about it, it's not a very helpful vision. So investing in your network, your peers and the like specifically, right? Especially peers who are not in your organization, peers who are in parallel organizations, who may not have the same sort of converged objectives as you have to be able to build that relationship. So you can go to them with your vision and say, hey, my vision here, your vision here, not so different. We should see these things in a similar sort of light. That ability to network, to build those relationships, and to effectively sell your vision is going to be key. And that's again one of those skills that you should be having at principal and above level for sure.
Thank you. I wondered when the selling kind of question was, answer was going to come up, because we do a lot of selling. And now we're going to focus on joy. And what is the most important thing in your experience that people need to realize when tackling a promotion?
Yeah, all of the things that have been said so far around skills are super important. But one of the things I've always found is that it's not just about the skills themselves, it's also about your mindset and your approach and how you're thinking about stuff. This starts to become true even at the staff level, but I feel like it just keeps becoming true that you need to start with thinking broader and then approach things that way. For example, I often see the mistake of people looking at their particular area and seeing like, oh, this is the most important thing, we need to solve this problem, and then thinking about how do we apply this outward? How do I convince those peers that we were just talking about that they should be doing this thing, instead of looking broader first and seeing, okay, what are the big problems across a larger area? And then how do I which ones also apply to my area and which ones make sense to work on, rather than starting from small and moving out. You instead start big and then maybe move back a little bit.
Yeah, that's a great insight. Thank you. We're gonna move on to the second topic, which is how to get promoted to this level as an individual contributor. Now, Andrew, why is it important to reflect on why do we want to be promoted before the fact of kind of getting that promotion?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the topic of this webinar kind of got me thinking, like, one of the first questions you need to answer is, do you actually want to be promoted from where you are right now? Especially if you're getting, like, what's your rationale for it? Is it because you want more reward or more recognition or more responsibilities? Because the chances are you can probably get most of those things doing your current role if you know where to look. And as we've all said here, the expectations and the role changes significantly. The sort of, as you promote into staff and then from staff onwards, it changes again. And it may well be the case that you put a lot of time and effort into chasing a role or a promotion, and you get it and you realize you don't actually want it because the role has changed so much that it's not really what you enjoy doing anymore. So I think that's something that people need to really consider when they're thinking about going for a promotion is, do I really want what that offers? And in many cases, as you get more senior, the role is undefined. It's unclear what it is that the expectations would be on you anyway. So you can quite often find yourself in a position you're not comfortable with purely because you just think, well, it's the next logical step. So I think that's just something it's really worth being thoughtful about before you start on that journey.
It's fantastic that you brought this up, because we discuss a lot about people who move into management, such as Joy. When you did your intro, you move into management and you realize that wasn't for you. But we rarely discuss among the levels how things change, and it's okay to stay where you are and be great at that.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So now on to Scott. What do you recommend people focus on when figuring out their next role?
Yeah, I like Andrew's focus there on kind of recognizing that you need to know what you're looking for. I think to some degree that's always true from day one of working in the industry, but I think as you get more senior, it gets really, really important. I think a lot of people focus on telling you to find the kind of work you enjoy. I have a coworker, Michelle Boo, who says the same thing as saying, find the work that gives you a lot of energy. And that may seem like a really minor pivot in wording. I think for me, it actually kind of changes my answer. And it helps reinforce for me that like waking up and being excited to do whatever that work is at the next level is really central. I think probably the panelists would agree, sounds like Andrew would, that like it's very easy to accidentally find yourself in a place where you're doing a bunch of work that you like authentically do not like and do not want to be showing up for. And I think you just have to feel like you own that and are paying attention to it. And the other big thing I think you have to watch out for is making sure there's actually a business need for the work at the level that you're trying to get into. When you're more junior, there's generally always room for one more person at the senior engineer level or something like that. Even at staff, that's usually true. But as you get very, very senior, there's actually not a lot of spots for it. And so you really don't want to be put in a spot where you find yourself fighting for work, or you find yourself sitting around and people saying, what does that guy do around here? What's he actually adding in value? You want to be walking into a spot where everyone agrees, wow, we really need somebody at this level in this role for XYZ reasons. Usually we frame that as a business need. Maybe you would take the terminology different for the org that you work in, but I think people wanting you to be there is the point. And then just you and your manager need to be really clear about what the appropriate level work is. I find it kind of hard to guess this, especially when I'm going for an up level. Kind of by definition, it's new to me. But if you and your manager can agree on XYZ projects or something very concrete, and you can say, great, this is my number one, number two goals. I'm going to not focus on a bunch of other stuff. That just makes sure you're all on the same page and share expectations.
Thank you for that. I thought you were going to talk about skills, but I love the framing that is much, much broader than that. And it's kind of focused on the business benefit more than anything.
Yeah, and maybe like, I guess, the skills differ, right? When depending on the person, depending on the principal engineer, you might do a lot of coding or do no coding. You might specialize in different areas, and so it's very unique to the person.
Yeah, thank you for that. And now we're gonna, ask Joy, because you've been in promotion committees, and that's, it gets very juicy there. What do you look for when considering candidates for promotion at this level?
Yeah, I've been on promotion committees at a number of places, and I guess some of the things I've noticed, there's three things I've noticed. So the first one, maybe by this point, as staff engineers, most of you have figured this out already, but I'm going to say it anyway. Often what we're looking for when we're looking through a packet or a case is the gaps. What are people not talking about? Because everything that's written down is going to be glowing. It's going to be say great things. So where are the things that aren't being said? And my assumption is usually if it's not there, then they didn't do it, which might not be true. So try to think through that when you're putting together a case, if that's how your company works. So that's the first thing. The second thing is communication. This hasn't really been said yet, but communication, the higher and higher you get, the more and more important communication is. You need to be able to communicate broadly at large, broadly, basically. And while on a promotion committee, I never look for, does the person communicate? It usually colors like, do I already know some of the projects they're working on? Do I already understand the complexity and the, like, how great is it? And if I do, then it's going to be less likely that I'm going to make assumptions in ways that I shouldn't be. So that can be a subtle way to help yourself as well. And the final thing, this is a mistake I often see, but there's often requirements for, working broadly, or like kind of related to what I was talking about earlier in terms of thinking broadly. And people will answer this in terms of like, oh, I worked with my PM, or I worked with, these three other teams. But then you look at it and you're like, but yeah, you were given a project that required you to work with people in those three other teams. So of course you worked with them. Like, I would have major concerns if you didn't work with them. But instead it's more of, were you given maybe still a small project, but did you go and say, oh, but this actually applies to this team over here, but even though nobody told me to? Or do you think about like, oh, this underlying technology we need, I think some other teams might need that. Let me go talk to some engineers and see if that makes sense, and then maybe refine the goals so that it works broadly across those. So it's more about like, are you proactively going out, and are you thinking larger and not just with the project you're given, and working isn't less about working with people and more about, are you thinking more broadly?
I like how this kind of goes back to the point that Shani mentioned earlier about building bridges. So you start early on showing you can build those bridges. Thank you. Before we move to the next topic, we've had some really good questions submitted. So I'm gonna take a couple of minutes to just answer those because they're relevant to what we've been discussing. So the first one is, as always, how much hands-on code time do you spend now as a staff plus engineer? I find it hard to balance playing a team lead-ish kind of project lead role sometimes, and then being that design review person. Please unmute yourself if you want to answer, or raise your hand. And anyone, Andrew?
I think the reality is it varies from engagement to engagement. Like you go where you're needed, you do what's needed. So sometimes that is hands-on writing code. Sometimes it's being hands-off and just empowering a team. So it's really difficult to answer that question.
I'll take a stab at it as well. I think it, to Andrew's point, it definitely does vary with time, and I think it also shifts as you sort of progress, right? I feel that when I was at the principal level, I wrote a lot more code. It might have been POC-ish code, but it was POC-ish enough that I could sort of, push it to prod. Somebody else would take it over, and I still do enough coding so that I get my hands wet and I sort of have a sense of what I'm asking people to do. But I find less and less of my code is relevant enough to actually push to prod, like even after refinement. It would be very, very obscure on the side sort of experimentation that I would done, as opposed to when I was a principal, it was more like, try it out, do a little bit, lay the groundwork for the team, have them take it over and push it to prod. So it's a continuum of how much code you write. It's also a continuum of like what happens to the code after you've written it.
Thank you. Joy, I see you are muted.
Yeah, I would mostly echo what's been said in terms of like, it depends on who you are, as to Scott's earlier point of like, is that something you really want to do or not? And is it something your company needs or not? But I would say like it also, for me at least recently, it's varied a lot. Like the last couple of weeks, I've been coding almost as much as I did when I was a senior SWE. But there are other times when I went for, 4 weeks without writing any code at all. And I wouldn't say I loved that, but it kind of depends on the current needs of the organization and the current, project cycle and like where things are and what's going on outside of your day-to-day thing.
Thank you all for that. I think, there's probably a follow-up question to this, which is how do you keep, your tool set kind of sharpened, so when you need to go back into code, you can write some code that is kind of reasonably good. But maybe that's for later on, or maybe for the chat. I'm gonna take one more question before we move on, because it says, did you have any mentors who helped you bridge that gap from staff to principal? Who would like to go?
I would love to say yes. I would love to say I had like a really clean single person here, or even a couple people. I've found this very hard, like transparently, very hard to find mentors that I can sort of spend a lot of time in. Maybe because it's so specialized, it's hard to find people who are shaped just like me, who want to do things just like I do. I have found some value in, I think it's Lara Hogan maybe has a blog post about a manager Voltron, kind of having the idea that, look, if you can't get everything you need from a single person, maybe you can find pieces of what you need from a lot of people and kind of cobble them together in a way that makes sense for you. And I've absolutely done that across companies. I've done it with managers sometimes that have traits that I want to emulate even as a principal engineer. And I think that's been as close as I've gotten. But communities like this are a great place to find those people too.
Thank you.
I think the one thing I would add to that is that we sometimes think of mentor as being somebody more senior, but I've found more of like a peer mentorship thing still being useful too. Finding people at my own level, or even somebody lower but really good at one particular thing, being useful to just talk to, bounce ideas off of.
It's a great tip. Shannon?
I think so I'll build on top of something that Scott mentioned, which is very important. It's kind of hard to find good mentors. But at the same time, in order to progress in your career, you do need those mentors. So I've been fortunate where I've had periods of time where I've had great mentors who told me exactly what I need to do. But most of the time, it's been a network of mentors who've been sort of helping me, right? Someone, I forget who first coined the phrase, but this idea of a personal board, right? A board of people who can effectively tell you, like, here's what you should be doing. So not one person in that committee or board, as you think of them in your head, is going to tell you what you need to do. But there's a set of people, like 3 or 4 or whatever is the right number for you, who you can approach with your problems, who will give you their own perspectives on how to solve for it. And it empowers you to at least get some additional context before you make your next decision, before you sort of think about the next thing. So I think it's a combination of mentors who are like going to tell you what to do, as well as this idea of a personal board where they provide guidance and give you their perspectives, and you shape that in the directions that you want to shape it.
Thank you, Shannon. I think I will add that it was when I promoted to principal that I saw my role was so specialized that sometimes even in like peer meetings, I felt it was a bit of loneliness, a bit like, oh my God, my role is just so different from everyone else. And I started going to communities such as Lead Dev, but then also in conferences, I would try to like almost like grab people that I felt were in maybe like a similar area of expertise, and it helped me enormously because they were feeling the same way I was. so yeah, this is a great place to build that community. We're gonna go back to the webinar now. I'm gonna go to our third topic, which is how to get your manager to advocate for you and provide opportunities for growth and development. And Shanique, we're back to you. And on the topic of influence, how can you use your influence to shape the relationship with your manager and your peers?
Yeah, so I think it was mentioned earlier, right? One of the advantages that you have at the most senior levels is you have a lot of flexibility in defining your role and also defining your level of involvement. So for everything that comes your way, avoid the temptation to be that one person who has to solve it all. There's a combination of, you're going to be a primary on a few things, you're going to be a collaborator on some things, and on some things, it's actually okay to say that I'm going to take a back seat on this one and have someone else drive. Getting that clarity is actually important for everything that comes your way. And there is a direct correlation between you having that clarity for yourself and the relationship and influence that you have on your network, right? Your manager specifically as well. Because when you achieve that, you basically get to a point where you can actually be a better partner, better employee, better peer, like however you want to think about it. Because when you try to get into everything at the same time, you just end up stepping on everyone's toes, and you're going to be ineffective. You're going to make everyone else also ineffective. By bringing that clarity to yourself, you know what you should be doing, you know how you should be engaging. And that actually leads to better relationships, and it leads to you being able to influence a lot more. And specifically when it comes to your manager sees that. They see your technical skills and all of that, but they also see your ability to be able to navigate through that. The the thing that I think goes through a lot of managers is, how much chaos can I throw at one person and expect them to stay afloat to some extent, right? And by able to sort of have that sort of mind map in your head where you're able to classify, you're able to sort of navigate the chaos, you're actually demonstrating to folks around you and your manager that, yeah, I'm good. I'm happy. I'm able to sort of progress on this stuff. And if there's more, I can probably take a lot more of it. And that's, sooner or later that gets noticed, and people tend to sort of promote you for those reasons, right? So again, it goes back to promotion, it goes back to clarity, it goes back to your peer network. All of those things come together in this sort of framing, I guess.
Oh, thank you for that. I think I have a follow-up question, maybe for the chat too, which is, how do you say no? Yeah, but maybe later on. We're gonna move on to Scott. to get some insight on what strategies do you use to advocate for yourself?
Well, Sean had talked about kind of being a handler of chaos, and I think like something that I've accepted over time is that my manager is also a handler of a lot of chaos. And as you get more senior, you have to kind of accept that the volume of chaos your manager is probably handling, especially if you report up to someone who has a bunch of people under them, is tremendous. And at any given time, there's probably at least one, if not 5 or 10, completely burning fires that they're actively managing. And so the time and attention they have for you is just less. And that is something that I think you have to some degree get comfortable with. And you have to go into a mode of more self-sufficiency. You have to know what you're looking for. You have to know what's going well and not going well for yourself. If you're getting really overloaded or if you're getting really bored, you need to be saying that out loud because the odds that it gets kind of pulled from you are lower than they were when you're junior. Even if you have a really good manager, they're just busier. And so I think just being really clear about that communication, especially if you want to change anything about your role or your focus or your scope, is essential. And we talked about the importance of kind of having strong relationship with peers, and I think that's totally true. I think you also just want to have a really excellent relationship with your manager wherever possible. They're going to be, whether you like it or not, they're going to be in a lot of rooms that you're not in, and they're going to be speaking for you, and they're going to be nominating or not nominating you for work. And that will never change. And you really just want them to have like a rich mental model of like, what does Scott care about? What does he want to be doing more? What does he not want to do any of? What's going to make him happy and excellent so that they can speak for you and really be your advocate in all those places that you basically won't be present in.
Thank you. I love how you're kind of tying and building on each other's answers because that clarity for yourself is also that clarity for others. And it will help you kind of be known for what you do, which is also a bit about branding and people knowing what to ask you even. So you really go and ask anyone in your team or your company who you know they are really busy and really spread thin. So you always think like, oh, I just leave them to be. We're gonna move on to the next topic, which is about how to make your impact visible to the business. Because in these roles, you are working for the business. And we're going to go to Andrew. Why is it important to invest in getting to know the people at leadership level?
So I think as you said, the more senior you get, the closer you work to the business, and the expectations on you are to deliver business value and demonstrate that you're able to move business metrics. And obviously that comes a big part of that is understanding what the business needs and what they want from you. And so I think earlier in your career, and also like the more senior you get, the greater the emphasis is on, as Shanid said, building your bridges, and your ability to influence is just one of the most important skills that you have. And so earlier in your career, when you're thinking about promotion, probably the people that were making the decisions, the ICs and the managers in the room, they knew you personally. They'd worked with you. They knew everything you did, and they had all the information to decide whether or not you were ready for the next level. As you get more important and your impact and your scope increases, sorry, not more important, as you get more senior and your scope increases, the decision makers for that level are probably leaders who may never have heard of you. And so what becomes more important is, as you say, your personal brand, like demonstrating that you know the right people, they know you, so that the decision is easy to make because they already know what your impact has been and what you've done. Unfortunately, that means that politics are involved. The sort of more senior you get, it's a dirty secret, but you do have to think about making sure that the right people know who you are, and you pick the right projects to give yourself the opportunity to show what you can do. It's unlikely that if you sit in a room on your own and just write awesome code, you're going to demonstrate that you can deliver the outcomes and the impact that somebody else could do by just knowing the right people. And it's unfortunate, but it tends to be true.
Thank you. And that ties when Joy was describing being on promotion committees and looking for people who are kind of expanding beyond. Because I think getting to leadership, it starts much earlier than actually getting the promotion. I think it might even start when you are a senior engineer and you're starting to kind of go outside of your circle of influence. So don't think that you promote and then all of a sudden you have to acquire all of these people. It's like, well, if you're at the same org, of course, take your time and build this up. And we're back. We're gonna move back to Joy. You described in an early conversation the importance, sorry, of keeping your ear to the ground. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, this is really tied to what Andrew was just talking about in terms of like understanding the lay of the land and understanding what is actually going to make business impact, what's actually important to the business right now, and trying to align what you would like to do or to that, or maybe even possibly completely change what you've been working on based on that. One of the hardest things is recognizing and realizing the project I've been putting my blood, sweat, and tears into is not actually important anymore. And maybe I should pause that or stop it and go work on something else. But that's something that's important to like keep reevaluating. And I guess back to the original question a little bit more of like keeping my ear to the ground, this is something I've been trying to think about what the right balance is too. There's a question about coding, but there's a balance for this as well. Like, what are the best forums for me to gather information without spending all my time gathering information? Because that's also a potential suck. Like, which Slack channels make sense both internally, possibly externally. There's some great resources externally where I can get the buzz on what the newest tech is, especially in my areas, and kind of understand what people are thinking about. But also things like we have a quarterly business review for some of our most senior people. And like, that's something I always make sure to attend because that's a good way to get some insight into the rest of our business and understand what's happening. All hands, like, depending on your company, those may or may not be useful, but like, that's also a way to kind of gather what people are thinking about, what people are talking about, what concerns are, anything along those lines. We have an Ask Me Anything with our VP of engineering, which for a while there, I was noticing that it was only the most senior people who would show up every time. And they didn't necessarily even have questions. They just mostly wanted to see what other people were thinking and try to get a pulse that way. We've managed to change it a little more to get more people in there, but that was another thing I've noticed is like trying to get that pulse and understand what's happening is incredibly important. And yeah.
Thank you. I also found that sometimes guilds or even employee resource groups, if your org has them, they're great ways to kind of navigate outside of kind of the formal structures and kind of meet people sometimes at very high levels.
Yeah, that's a good point. The Women in Tech group at Box was how I got to know people across the organization in many cases. And it was a great way to already have somebody if I needed more information in a particular area.
Thank you. And we're going to move to the last topic. We have, I think, 5 minutes left together. So the last we're going to focus on whether it's better to promote up within your organization or outside it. And Andrew, what has been your experience in promoting when changing organizations?
Yeah, so whenever I changed organizations, I kind of ended up with a different title. So it's difficult to know whether it's actually been a promotion or not. But I think thinking about so obviously it takes time and effort to get promoted within a company, and the main reason for that, or one of the main reasons, is that there's so much data for the committee to go on. They know what you've done, and they've got a huge amount of information to assess what your ability is. And it's just not possible to get the same amount of signal from an interview with an outside candidate. So I think it's probably fair to say that it's easier to get promoted by changing jobs than it is to get promoted within a company. But there is a huge risk in doing that. And I think that risk is that you don't really know. Like, getting promoted within a company and taking on the next level, which we've always said is a change in role and scope and is harder. But you're already in a place where you understand the context and you have your network and you have your people. So it's an easier transition. Whereas coming into a company from the outside and expecting to have a bunch of stuff thrown at you that you don't have any context, you don't have any network. It's a high risk strategy to change jobs just to get a promotion at this level. Yes, you can do it, but it may not end well. So I think that's one of those things that, again, you need to be really clear what it is you're doing and why you're doing it to before you go that route.
Yeah, definitely. And also ask that during the interviews to make sure you're interviewing for the level you think you are.
Well, especially because, yeah, as I said, every company has a different expectation set of levels. It's very hard to assess when you're outside the company what the expectations are because everyone is quite vague about the roles until you actually try and live it. It's really hard to understand what's expected of you.
Thank you. And I'm going to ask the last question to Shanine, because you've been in your current organization for nearly 15 years. Maybe you can provide some counterbalance to Andrew. What has helped you navigate different roles?
Yeah, I think I think I concur for the most part with what Andrew was saying, right? I think there's a little bit of conventional wisdom out there in terms of, the easiest way to get promoted is to go to a different job at a different title. And I think it's exactly what Andrew said. What you lose when you do that effectively is you lose your network. You lose the context that you had. And the advantage that I find that I have in my role, being here for a while is I've had the opportunity to build and nurture those relationships. That peer network that I talked about, that relationship with managers and leaders in the company, that comes with time. And, you know, ever so often, it's going to be a scenario where a problem is thrown at me that I don't fully understand. But I know enough of the people around me to be able to have a conversation with them and have them give me enough context so that I can actually jump into it. And that's the trade-off there, right? It takes sometimes a little longer to get promoted within your organization, but you've built enough of an understanding, you have enough of the context, you have enough of the network that transition becomes a lot easier for you. And you're, in many cases, in my opinion, you're better positioned to handle the next challenges that are going to be thrown at you.
Thank you. And I think before we close up, I'm going to take one more question from the audience. And someone asked, do you all as Staff Plus have direct reports or are folks here individual contributors? This is a touch on the topic on influencing a Staff Plus without direct reports and level setting with manager on work goals with that structure.
I can start that. I think I've lived on both sides of it. So have had direct reports in the past. I'm currently in a role where I do not have direct reports. The interesting thing, though, is that I still have the idea of here's a group of people who are closely aligned to my objectives, who are closely aligned to my career path. And I build like a more federated sort of relationship with those individuals where no one reports to me. I don't expect any of them will ever report to me, but we have enough of a trust and a working relationship where when they need something, they know to come to me. When I need something, I know I can sort of reach out to them. So you sort of, you sort of have this, this sort of relationship where no one actually reports to you, but you have enough people that you trust around you that you have a similar sort of relationship. I think much of the navigation that happens on the IC track is going to be around how do you keep yourself grounded in your ability to deliver, but at the same time also find that balance with here's a network of people who don't quite report to me, but also I trust enough to be able to delegate work to.
Thank you. We have time for one more. Andrew, did you want to add anything?
Only to say that I'm an IC. I was given a decision. I was given a choice sort of 7-8 years ago of do you want to have direct reports? Do you want to just be focused on the tech and be a pure tech lead with no management responsibility? And yeah, it was a no-brainer for me. It was just one of those things where I'd managed people before, and it's not something I enjoyed doing or was good at. So I strive very hard to stay away from that kind of reporting structure.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to take a few minutes to thank you all our panelists for sharing your insights today. Now we're going to wrap up our panel. So let's go around the room and summarize in a sentence. What is the most important skill, in your opinion, to develop to become a principal engineer? And now we're going to go back in reverse alphabetical order. So we're going to start with Shanid.
Yeah. So I think if there's one thing that I would like everyone to leave with is to think differently. Think differently about your role. Think differently about what you need to be doing to get there. And also think differently about how you approach what's put in front of you. Don't jump into it head first. Think about it a little bit, understand your own interest in certain things, understand your limitations, understand where to leverage your network. So think differently in how you approach some of that stuff as well. So that's the one thing that I would tell everyone. Think differently.
Amazing. Now, Scott.
Yeah, I'd say I like Joy's comment, like zoom out, understand what you're trying to accomplish, and then take a couple steps back and feel empowered and like an owner to color outside the lines of your technical job title or your technical org or whatever, and really focus on the outcomes and be flexible about the how and the what that you do in the process.
Fantastic. Next, Joy.
Yeah, I was kind of on the fence between what both of you have already talked about, so I'm going to go with my other answer, which is really around communication. Working on communication, being able to do written, spoken, both big groups, small groups, all that kind of stuff. It becomes more and more and more important the more senior I've gotten.
Thank you. And finally, Andrew.
Don't ask for permission. Like the whole point of the role is you need to go and find what needs to be done, not wait for somebody to tell you. And that comes down to just not asking for permission.
Thank you. I'll add one last, which is reframe politics to relationships and focus on building a work environment that you love to work in and other people also love to work in. And we're going to wrap up here. So thank you so much for all the good insights for today. We're all going to be heading for the Lead the Slack Staff Plus channel. Please head here to read the answers on the questions that unfortunately we didn't have time to get to. We're going to be back on the 4th of June for our next Staff Plus webinar, and we will be announcing the topic and the panelists in the coming weeks. We're also excitingly running quarterly Staff Plus community roundtables. They're a chance for you to network with your peers over shared challenges and connect with us at the Lead Dev to help shape the future of these webinars and wider content. The next roundtable is going to take place on June 27th. We've got 15 places open for folks to join us. Look out for the message in Slack in a moment for more info. Thank you for joining and hope to see you next time. Bye.